Bayhawks owner Brendan Kelly is giving ownership of his team back to the league.
That news is first reported by Inside Lacrosse and the Capital Gazette last night. The story also says that the MLL will be moving away from the one owner, one team structure it adopted prior to last season, moving to a single entity structure where the owners are investors that are also board members.
That brings to an end Kelly's run as Bayhawks owner. He bought the team back in March of 2010, owning the team during 4 championship runs. That included this past season when Chesapeake hoisted the Steinfeld Trophy for the 6th time as a franchise.
Kelly said this to the Capital Gazette reporter Bill Wagner this week. Quote, Major League Lacrosse voted to go with a single entity league with no franchises. That is not something I want to be involved with. That model turns me into an investor and board member as opposed to an owner, and that is just not in my competitive nature. I poured my heart and soul into making the Bayhawks the premier franchise in Major League Lacrosse, and that is reflected in the 4 championships. I'll have those rings forever, along with the memories of each of those teams that made championship runs.
So we now bring in analyst Evan Washburn. Evan, you've been around this league for quite a while. What does this mean for the league, this new revelation with Brendan Kelly stepping away and giving the Bayhawks back to the league?
Well, I will say I was pretty surprised by the news, and I wouldn't say I'm surprised that there's constant change going on in this league. I think that's just the place we find ourselves in, that it's ever changing, and they're still searching for obvious answers to how to remain solvent and hopefully successful and have some stability after what's been a rough couple of years. But when it comes to Brendan Kelly, he is, as that article by Bill Wagner described, been one of the champions of professional lacrosse and one of the most generous and most active members of the community, and one of the people that's really done a lot of work to make this as successful a league as it's been. And I think he just viewed it as something that he didn't want to be a part of based off of the fact that it's outside of what the framework has been and the traditional framework, and that's ownership and not being so much just an investor, as he put it, a member of the board, but he owned the Bayhawks and he got to run them the way he wanted to, and that was pretty successful in terms of what professional lacrosse has been. So I think at the moment, to answer your initial question, it means that this league is completely turning itself upside down. And maybe that's a good thing, because as you and I have discussed a lot over the last couple of years, change needed to happen. And I do trust Mark Burdett and Sandy Brown that they've looked at every option and they feel like this is the best one.
What's really interesting about this is the ownership aspect is one of the things that set the MLL aside from the PLL. And now you're looking at it both sort of in the same type of scenario, with the difference being the MLL still in certain cities. What does single entity, in terms of not having those owners that stand out, mean for the league as a whole and for the players?
Yeah, we're going to get a release next week that they're going on tour, because that would be pretty interesting, and that would be a complete turn of events. No, but seriously, because I've spent some time thinking about it, knowing that we were going to talk. One of the things that I hope that it brings is continuity, because that was one of my biggest complaints with the league over the last, let's say, 5 or so years, especially since I've been calling games, is that I didn't think there was fairness in terms of certain teams had, in my mind, benefits of ownership, like Brendan Kelly, or in Denver with the Boland family and what they provided the players and the coaches in the structure. And then some of the other teams were under let's say, restrictions based off of monetary budgets and things that put players, in my opinion, in a position to be behind the 8 ball in a way that had nothing to do with their preparation or attention to detail as athletes. So, my hope would be is that if this is a single entity, all the teams are given the same amount and are dealing with travel, with practice time, with equipment, with everything, with health, with nutrition, every aspect of being a pro athlete. It should all be the same so that these guys can compete in a fair environment.
That is one of the interesting things, and I think one of the things the MLL had going for him was the fact that if you did have an owner that was willing to spend more money, there was more money available for certain top players to want to play in New York or Boston, and ability to keep one of those guys. And that seems like it goes out the window with this new structure.
Well, we might not know that yet because, I mean, in theory, the salary cap's still the salary cap, and the teams are going to be each given their allotted amount of money to fill out their rosters, and certain players are going to make more, and we know that seniority or time served in terms of being in the league can help you be in a different bracket in terms of salary. So I don't necessarily know that that'll be the case. Yes, there were instances where certain teams, again, took care of players better, but by the law or letter of the rules, they were only being paid under the same salary cap as any of the other teams. I think that the hope would be is that they don't take any step back in terms of the commitment to compensation that was such a big part of their story and what they pushed out there last year, as they again dealt with the emergence of the PLL and some of the benefits they were providing players. The MLL tried to step their game up and did. So let's hope that there's no step back in that department, that the money is all still there to pay these players more, and hopefully keep paying them more, give them benefits and all the things they deserve if they're going to be part of this league.
That's fair. Finally, one of the big things was the legacy of the Bayhawks, or the legacy of the Cannons. If this all kind of comes back together, do those legacies stay the same despite the fact they're not going to have an individual owner that's operating that organization?
I think so, because as long as we're still dealing, and we joked off the top about how this is starting to look more and more like the PLL, but as long as they're regionalized, and as Mark Burdett in that article by Bill Wagner of the Capitol says, is that the plan is to still play at Navy Marine Corps Memorial Stadium, and as long as they in Boston remain in that community, I think that you can still look back at the tradition of that team. Because as a kid who grew up in this area and remembers when the MLL started and the Bayhawks played their first years at Hopkins, and then Towson, then Georgetown, then George Mason. Those are all part of my memory of this and legacy, to use your term, of that organization. Now, I would wholeheartedly say that it really took stride when Brendan Kelly took over, but I think every portion of every team's history, whether it's new ownership, new coaches, new players, and now a new look league, will just be another chapter in what's hopefully a story that keeps going here with this league.
All right, Evan, interesting times for the MLL. We appreciate the time. Thanks.
You got it.